Does wondering what gears you use when you're out riding gravel keep you awake at night? I mean, it doesn't for me, that'd be weird, but hey, maybe it does for you. Good news though, because there is a solution from SRAM, and Shimano actually, now that I think about it. Anyway, the point is the new SRAM Force eTap AXS Wide gives you both an amazing gear range and the ability to track your gear usage. So it got me thinking, what do I actually use when I ride? So I've put in a few weeks of testing, I've crunched all the data, and I've put together a little video about what gears I actually use, what that means for owning and running this particular group set, and sort of what that means generally for riding gravel. Buckle up, we're about to get nerdy. This whole thing is possible because the group set can broadcast gear use information to your head unit via Bluetooth. There's even this cool little screen on the Garmin where you can see exactly what you're using. I mean, Shimano's Di2 can do this as well, but it does need that added D-Fly hardware thingy. SRAM does it by default, which is obviously better. This was actually really helpful when I went back to a 2x system because I had to kind of relearn how to use chainrings again. Anyway, once the ride is done, there is the SRAM AXS web app that can consume your ride data, crunch it, and present it back to you. All you do is drag your fit files in, it'll process it, and bam! You get all kinds of charts. If you really want to get nerdy, you can also put in power meter data and all kinds of other stuff, but I don't have a power meter on my gravel bike, so let's just look at the gearing. No real need to build tension, here is the graph. On it you will see the usage of rear cogs based on thousands of shifts and weeks of riding. Just a quick note that my gravel grinding does tend to be biased towards hillier routes because I love riding hills and I live in a place with some really fantastic hills, particularly some fantastic gravel hills. So I do a lot of climbing, which could bias the usage a little bit towards more that end of the cassette. Nonetheless, what you do see here is a very clean bell curve, and that shows that I'm spending the vast majority of my time riding in the mid cassette. Just for fun then, let's have a look at how the chain rings go with the 43 and the 30, and boom, it is almost 50-50. It's about 53 versus 47 roughly, which is again, remarkably close. The first time I saw all this data, it made me quite happy, and there's a very good reason for that, other than being a nerd. A nice spread of gear usage means great things for drivetrain longevity, which is especially important when you're talking about one as expensive as this. The 12 rear cogs and 2 chainrings do an excellent job of spreading the wear far and wide. And I've learned some lessons about chainware recently with my 1-bys. For the last 12 months, I've been absolutely chewing through chains and cassettes on my 1-by gravel drivetrains. And I do take reasonable care to clean them and lube them and keep them running well. Obviously, gravel is just straight dirty riding and you are just going to accrue more things that create friction and wear things out faster, but still I have tried, I really have, because I don't want to keep spending on chains and cassettes all the time. Interestingly, we did have a close look at one of the burnt out cassettes and we found that the extreme ends are the ones that wear out particularly prominently. So with the GRX, the 42 tooth cog and the 11 tooth cog were just absolutely lunched. The gears were slipping, it was just running like absolute garbage. Now the reason for that is that on a 1-by drivetrain you spend a huge amount of time on those cogs. Those are the bookends to your gear ratios. So yeah, you're gonna wear them out very quickly. Take my GRX as an example, which I ran with a 40 tooth chainring and an 11-42 cassette. The 40x11 gives me a ratio of 1 chainring turn to 3.64 turns of the 11 tooth cog. The Force wide equivalent is roughly the 4312, but then you get the 11 and the 10 above that. At the climbing end of the GRX, it's 1 chainring turn to 0.95 turns of the 42, where the SRAM has the 30x32 roughly matching and the 30x36 exceeding that ratio. That just shows how much you can spread the load around, and that's the extreme ends of the cassette. There's plenty more gears in the middle to share the wear and tear. With this all in mind, I think there's going to be some changes with how people are riding gravel and how people are sort of speccing their gravel bikes. Also how manufacturers are going to choose sort of their shop floor outlays for gear and equipment. And let's start with a not so bold prediction on that. I think 1x11 drivetrains will rapidly lose market share in the coming years. The SRAM 1-by ecosystem did an admirable job of helping to establish wide range and affordable gravel group sets, but the upsides are less clear in 2020. 1x11 drivetrains do have simplicity and fantastic tire clearance on their side, but I think that's getting less important to me now than the ride experience, now that I've seen what a 2x gravel group set can do. Let's go back to the ratios that I talked about earlier with GRX 2x as an example. Staying within the maximum sort of approved Shimano range of a 48-31 chainring and an 11-34 cassette, you have a maximum ratio of 1 to 4.3 on big chainring, small cog, and 1 to 0.91 on the climbier end of the gearing. Compare that to the maximum Shimano allowed 1x, which is a 40-tooth chainring and an 11 to 42 cassette. You get 1 to 3.64 and 1 to 0.95. Now the caveat there being that I know some people have said that you can put a 46 on the Shimano, but I am sticking with what Shimano sort of approves. So comparing the 1x to 2x, you do get a significantly better range with the 2x. That'll spread the wear and tear across the drivetrain better, you'll get better gear ratios, and come on, you're gonna get Shimano front derailleur shifting, which is excellent. I love Shimano's mechanical shifting, it's fantastic, and I would happily spec a gravel bike with it and go off and have adventures. Let's loop back and talk about the SRAM Force eTap AXS Wide, which I really wish they'd given a shorter name. Anyway, I've absolutely loved the gear range. It's wide for a start, but it's also closely spaced. I mean, look at that gear progression. It starts with single tooth jumps, moves into 2-tooth in the mid cassette, and then starts to blow out once you're into the climbing gears. It feels smooth, and you can always drop into the gear ratio that you want. My full review on the SRAM group set isn't going to be far away, but I am going to warn you. I'm going to talk a lot about how amazing the gear range is on the Force eTap AXS Wide. I've been climbing things that previously I've only really been able to get up on a mountain bike with Eagle on it, and I have very rarely spun out the gearing at the faster end of the cassette. The 43x10 will get you to 55 kilometers an hour pretty easily. You're not even spinning that far above 90 RPM, if at all. Ultimately, the gears you have are the gears that you're going to use. But the lesson for me with this SRAM drivetrain is that if you have a wide range, you are going to use them. I know people tend to get used to whatever they have over time and perhaps feel like new things coming into the market are unnecessary or maybe even a little bit gimmicky, but I can assure you that the benefits are real. And I, for one, am really glad that both of the big players in this space, Shimano and SRAM, are really starting to spoil us with choice. That is a good thing. It's interesting that I use the faster moving gears so little. I'd say that's generally reflective of a couple of things. Gravel riding is just a bit slower overall, but also my attitude with gravel is different. Once you get over 50 to 55 kilometers an hour, I'm happy to let gravity do the work for me if that is why I'm going quickly on a descent or something. And realistically, the fastest gravel riders that I know are quick because of their bike handling, not because of their gearing. In fact, I have better gearing than they do, and they still absolutely flog me on the descents because they are more skilled. With the drivetrain, you get such a fantastic range of climbing gears, and you also get close ratios through the cassette. So thank you to SRAM for giving this amazing range of gears, but also the ability to track it using such a nerdy system. I've probably seen what I needed to see out of the system. I don't know if I'll bother loading more of my rides into it, but I am glad to have had this experience because I think that this data can actually help other people when they're sort of going, oh, I don't know what I want with my gravel rig. And I think generally speaking, my advice is to buy yourself options. Give yourself a wide range of gears because, you know, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And inevitably you will need it unless you live in a really flat part of the world. At which point, I don't know, use an 11 to 32 1x with a 50 up front. Go for it. It's your bike, do whatever you want. And that is where I'm gonna leave it. Thank you so much for joining me on this ridiculously nerdy video. I hope you have found something of value here. If you did, don't forget to like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff really helps me out as a small channel. Ride safe, stay healthy. Oh, and let me know what your sort of choice of gear ratios is. I'm always curious to see how gravel grinders are sort of going about their business. And I will see you next time.